Real quick, remember in 4.4, we learned the different types of expressions that you will see, but there are only 4. And once you kind of get the gist of these 4 types of expressions, the whole rest of the chapter is this way. And section 4 was more about understanding what makes, let me get this out of my head so I'm not continuing to wear myself out with it. There we go. What gets us from the last step of a FOIL question, a product from section 2, what gets us from that last step to the step where we are in 4.3? We talked about that again on 4.4 when we introduced all this stuff, that the last step was the idea of going back to that just basic FOIL process. And let me go ahead and use one for today. I'm gonna make it up, so let's hope it works. Just kidding. So remember, the setup for this was that we took this 2x and multiplied it to the back parentheses. And then we took the 3, and multiplied it to the same back parentheses. I'll go back and go review over those types real quick here in a second. So this is the setup from section 4.2. This was the multiplying section. What we're doing in 4.4 and 4.5 and for the rest of the chapter is undoing this process to find those 2 parentheses. So we have the first, the outside. So I'll call it FOIL just because I keep saying that. But remember, from in section 2, when we learned this, I really pushed through the idea of steps so that when you got to something that FOIL wasn't going to work for, that you were ready for it. So the next step here is to multiply. Remember, that's to add the exponents. And then our last step is to combine like terms and don't add exponents, don't touch exponents. So the multiply step is to add the exponents, and that's going to be a 6x squared plus 4x plus 9x plus 6. And the last step is to combine like terms. The only like terms are the middle ones again, and that's your O and I. The marker is getting really low. Let's see if I have another ink cartridge readily available. I don't think I do. So we're going to be working with this type of picture for this section. This section is kind of, it is quite a bit more complex than 4.4. So 4.4 just introduced, I mean, we'd already worked with it in 4.2. We are undoing the FOIL process, and 4.4 introduced the 4 different types of expressions and the way they would land. And remember that when we had all these kind of pieces of information that the expression gave us, like with the C being positive, meant that the factors will be the same, and we will add them. And the B being positive means that both factors would be positive. B being negative, both would be negative. So this is in the category of C being positive. C being positive means that your factors will be the same sign and you'll have either both be positive or both be negative, and that will depend on the B. And so then in the next set that the C is negative, factors will be opposite signs, and we will subtract. Then you look at the B. So this is kind of backwards from what, I mean, we've all taught you endlessly about reading left to right. Most of what we do is reading left to right. But when we're looking at what the signs are telling us in these expressions, we're looking here at these back signs and then looking at the B, because that's what will determine what our B is telling us. So our B being negative here is different than our B being negative there. And it's going to be important that you keep that straight. So B being positive says the big will be positive. B being negative says the big will be negative. Big factor, that is. So that can't be translated up here. So a lot of times my students get this kind of stuck in their head. The B being negative means the big is negative, and they translate it up here, and that's not what this is. And it takes looking at C to make that realization. So you've got to look at C before you decide what those signs are going to be telling you. So that's just our general pieces, kind of the structure of what we'd be working with from here on out. And then in 4.4, we started with our rules of how to identify or how to kind of get started, because 4.3 was here. So the end of 4.3 and here. And here. So all of this was 4.3. Last half of 4.3 was all about doing factor by grouping. And what it is undoing your FOIL that you had. My computer is slightly in my way. So then in 4.4, we had to start figuring out how to get the middle term and what that process looked like. So the first, we started in with some steps of, oh, I'm just wrong about that. That should be, not that it's wrong, but I like to keep it in. Look at standard form first. Is the equation or the expression in standard form. And that means ax squared plus bx plus c. And then, is there a GCF that can be factored off? If so, do that. Then identify. We had lots of practice in 4.4 with both of these levels of complexity on top of this. So the first half of section 4.4 was nice and straightforward. And then they threw in your GCFs and being out of order. I didn't say they, I did. So just make sure that those are standard thought processes as you approach these next few sections. So identify your A, B, C. And then the last question, which kind of leads us into the work, the main challenge of the last couple of sections here is what numbers multiply to get C, or in 4.5, we're going to do today A times C. And really in 4.4, you're doing A times C, just A has been 1 the whole time. So this is short form. So what multiplies to get C and also combines, and we use the word combine because we want to make sure we're aware that it could be add or subtract to get B. So that's the biggest challenge of all of this chapter, is this chunk of work that seems to be kind of you need to have some of your, like we talked about, automaticity of your math facts. That would be really helpful. But if we don't, we also have that option in the calculator, which was the y1 equals C or AC, y2 over x equals C over x plus x. And then you're looking at this is finding factors in calculator. So a bunch of prep work in order to get us going on this next section, kind of refreshing what we did in the last section. Remember that your Y2 is actually your B. It's what you're looking at to then find the factors that you need. These will be your factors. So the main step, but after getting from here to here, most of we have had lots of practice from 4.3 and then all of 4.4 of undoing. So this was really repetitive after this next new piece of information, this new skill that we have to have. So looking at one from 4.4, the process here was to identify our parts, identify our coefficients, and then ask ourselves, because A is 1, we can just work with C. So again, that's another side piece of information. A equals 1. Factors go straight into the parentheses. So that's what we worked with the last section. So looking at the factors of 21, what to add together. Remember, the plus sign tells us that we're going to have the same signs and we're going to add. And then this again tells us that both are negative, not that the big is negative. Because if we read left to right, yes, we have a tendency to want to jump into the big as negative, but you've got to incorporate what the C is telling us. So that's telling us we're going to add, and here we get negative 10. That means both those factors are going to need to be negative. And we learned that we can go straight into the parentheses with those two numbers. But we practiced a lot of putting it into the expressions so that we can work through the undo process backwards from 4.3. So the whole 4.3 work is going to come into play, especially for this section. And so let's go ahead and do this one. Split it down the middle. Got a negative GCF. Factor out the front and factor out back. Remembering that negative GCF means that I need to factor out a negative under here. And we have we go from here, it's that last, or kind of the first step from FOIL going forward, and so that backwards in the undoing process. Okay, so yeah, want to grab a picture. It's kind of a good lump sum, and this will be where we go today, is talking about, because notice we've got coefficients, and we didn't have that at all in the last section. So 4.5 is going to be all, what is it going to take? So it's going to be the next question. It's not hard to do, because as you can see, when you think about the numbers of 21, you can come up with, without a whole lot of extra work. I mean, yes, the calculator might help a little bit, but it doesn't take much to find the two factors, right? Well, finding the two factors here, if I'm just looking at C, this is 4.5. This is where it gets complicated and where we need our steps. Because if I'm just looking at C, the value of C, the only factors in C are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3, and none of those combine to get my 13. So this is where we get into, we've got some paying attention work to do. So again, if A, your leading term, has a coefficient that you cannot divide off, so it's going to be something other than 1. So these are the straightforward, go straight to the parentheses, get to look at C. If A is something other than 1 and it won't divide off, then you're going to have to use the AC method. So it's not going to be as obvious by looking at that last number to figure out your factors. So let's bring this one up here, just so we can get a quick taste on how that's going to work. So identifying your A is 6 this time, and B is 13, C is 6 again. So when A is something other than 1, we've got to do A times C. And if it helps you just to do A times C for all of them, even this guy, notice that if I do A times C, it's just 1 times 21. So it's the same thing as doing just C. So if it's helpful to stay in that habit, because my students really struggle with, when do I use the AC method and when do I not? And like, when is it required? Well, it's required when it's something other than 1 that won't come off. Like you don't have a choice. Or again, we go back to reference that the first, when we first started all this factoring. I mean, you could do just guess and check and trial and error. That's kind of how I had to learn it. But we have created steps in order for you to find the factors without having to wear yourself out and a whole bunch of paper. So A times C here is 36. Looking at the factors of 36, it's kind of a lot. I need the set that's going to add together to get me 13. So looking through my list of factors, does anybody see a set that's going to give me 13? 4 and 9, great, yes, thank you. So there's our 13. Real tempting to jump in here. I mean, I've had students do all kinds of things where they just jump in and put the 4 and the 9. I mean, we make up a bunch of stuff because of section 4.4. You have lots of confidence from section 4.4, and it's great because it is easier. Section 4 is easier because they do go straight to the parentheses. But I mean, I really come in with this kind of stuff. People will just not even have coefficients at all in front of those X terms. And if you just remotely FOIL that out, first of all, your very end term right now is going to be 36. That's not 6. So this is where your middle work that we've been doing all along, it becomes necessary. And I will share with you a shortcut that our group does. I personally, I'm kind of a logical person, and if anything can be step-by-step and logical and makes sense, then that's important to me. So the shortcut that we have is great. I love it, but it is just a shortcut, and it doesn't have any logic to it. When I teach it, it is just really uncomfortable because it's just a shortcut. It just is what it is. There's no logic to remembering it. You just have to memorize it. So I have substituted in the 4 and 9 instead of put them into the parentheses. Again, we substituted them in for the B term. That was your O plus I, and now we're breaking it up. Then we do the factor by grouping, back to the front, then back to the back, which we've already, at this point, we'll start seeing that we're now in this space. We're now in the work that we know how to do from 4.3. We start looking at the front. Look at the back. And there's your parentheses that we start out with. So this might be a good time to take a picture because it is kind of all the work flows together. And again, remember that you can use your calculator. If you're going to use your calculator, it's going to be A times C, or you can just do the multiplication and put it in. Okay, so grab a picture if you need it. I'll step way out of the way because this kind of flows, kind of helps us understand where it's coming from. And it really kind of solidifies why we need it, why we need to do that middle work that feels so messy and uncomfortable because it's lots of little steps, right? This whole chapter, this is the attention to detail chapter. All the little bits will wear you out. Which again, it just takes lots and lots of practice. Can I erase it? Are we good? So then the rest of this chapter is going to be just versions of this stuff over and over and over again. Let me give myself this space in case I need it. I'm going to try to leave stuff on the board though. So one that starts off with the first one, we've already done one that's a plus one, so let's go to the next one. There we go. Looks like it's just the same. So with all of these, any and all of these questions on the test, my first process is to say, my first steps are going to be, is it in standard form? Yes, go for the GCF. Because goodness, I would love for it to not have the 3 right there. And as I look ahead, I don't see anything that I can take out. And even if I look ahead and it's not this number completely that'll come out, you want to make the math as small as possible when you're doing this work. So definitely give the GCF step the attention it deserves. So then A is, oh, there we are. It's a negative 14 right there. It's a little messy. So again, identifying the ABC and what do we get? And to find that out, we need to multiply. Call this step 5 if you want to, A times C, and then factor. Find the factors. So A times C here is 3 times 8, and that's 24. I mean, right away, just looking at the factors of C, it should give you like this pause of, wait a second, I don't have any numbers that are going to give me 14. So that hopefully will help you reset and go back and remember that you've got to do the A times C. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. And so as you look through your list, again, that stuff would be here on the calculator with a bunch of other options, but you're going to look for the one that has negative 14 in the B column, in the Y2 column. And then it's going to be associated with the 2 factors that are going to work for you. Those are your 2 factors. Sub those in. Split it down the middle, recognizing that that's a negative and that we're going to need to deal with it. And so then, like I said, once we get the factors set up and in this position, the rest of the work is really repetitive from section 2 to section 3 and 4. So the only GCF that will come out of the front is the B. We're doing a negative, and it looks like a 2 will come out. Looks like I'm wrong about that. Hold tight. What's happening? Oh, 1412. Sorry, there we go. So typo. Very good. For y'all to see it happen for me too. As I'm writing this out, I wrote 14 instead of 12. This is the kind of stuff that'll happen. And I said it a minute ago. This is the chapter of details. Attention to details. So now the 4 comes out and creates, and my pausing a little bit here was that this, I was recognizing that this parentheses was not going to match the one that I was creating.
Where did you get -4?
I've created negative, I used -4 because I need it to come out as -4.
Well, where did you get like the number from?
Uh,
Like, where did 4 come from?
The GCF between 12 and 8.
Oh,
Yep. So yeah, good question. Again, because I have a negative in the middle, that indicates that I have to do this negative GCF. So as I'm going through, I'm looking at between 12 and 8, what is the GCF? That's going to be 4. And if you need to use your calculator, but that again, that's what I was saying about the calculator, is the more that we're having to pause to go jump on the calculator and find things, the more room there is for losing your place and kind of forgetting your steps. So definitely use the calculator as you need it, but hopefully some of this stuff as you keep practicing will become more automatic, especially with the number sense. Okay. So that's the gist of it. That's most of section 4.5. I mean, I say that it's all going to start over again. I'm going to click around here and let us see some of these.
so the real big difference between this and the last one is.
The A times C. Yep. That's your newest piece of the puzzle is A times C. Is A times C, and you have to do this work. Before, we were able to just pop them into the parentheses, and y'all started noticing that as we worked through them. And it was like, oh, I'm just going to drop them into the parentheses because it's easier and quicker. But this is the section, and this is how you know is when there's a number in front of the leading term. So the leading exponent, sorry, the leading coefficient, if it's something other than 1, so it's not 1, because 1 makes it easy, then I know I have to do this process. Yep. Okay, I will go through and kind of grab a few of these more challenging ones, just the different levels of complexity, like they put the order out and we have GCF going on top of having to remember the AC method and plugging in and doing the work this way. So I will skip over this one and happily go back to them, but they are all now just different variations of these forms, of this formats. So you're going to have, it's going to bounce around between these to make sure that you hit all of them having to use the AC method. And then we get into lots of practice. I really wanted y'all to have lots of practice. So, but then starting at number 9, and this is because I know what I'm looking at. I don't expect y'all to be able to read each one and be able to jump around so quickly and know when you're in order or GCF. I want you to be working through those steps every time. So hit up every single question. Am I in standard form? Do I need a GCF to come out? Every time. So, but I am kind of jumping over to number 9 where we have a GCF. But I won't be with you on the test to be like, hey, this is one that you have a GCF on. So make sure you're paying attention as best you can. Looking through that, ideally, we'd love to grab that 50, right? Because we want it AB1 so that we just have simple math and simple work to do. Unfortunately, as I look through it, the only thing I can pull out is a 5. And so the 5 comes out in front, and remember, like I said in section 4.4, go ahead and put that guy in your answer box. Like, go ahead and handle that so that you're not having to keep up with it all along the way, because it will get in the way because of this AC method. So all this chapter or section 5 work, you won't want to keep up with your GCF. You will want to be done with it. in the sense of being, it's already an answer. So we have 10 x squared and 3 and somebody want to do that one for me? It's escaping me. But it's positive. Thank you. It's certainly gonna be trouble for a minute there. I had to figure it out myself. So there we are in the middle, and notice that as we took the GCF off, that we didn't get rid of our A like we would like to. So we go and identify all our parts and know that we're going to have to do all the bulky work. So A times C is 10 times 3 is 30. 30 is another big one. Listing out all these factors, absolutely use your calculator. You'll be looking for where the outside of the Y2 column would be positive 17 somewhere. So it's going to have two factors sitting over here. Oh, kind of right away. That's helpful. So our list reveals that the 2 and the 15 because it's all positive. Again, remember we did a lot of labeling last time where this says this is the same and we're going to add, and this told us that the both of the factors would be positive. So instead of bringing in that 5 along with the picture, I've already typed it into my answer box so that I can go ahead and spread out and not be worried about it. So that when I plug this in, it doesn't get so messy. Because once you get into then factor by grouping again, you've got another set of parentheses. You've got to figure out how to incorporate that 5 along with it, and it gets a little messy. So again, we just subbed in for 17. This is just a normal positive GCF, so I don't need to label it. Coming out of the front, you've got a 2x. And out of that, looks like a 3. And I wrote mine along with me towards the end so that I didn't lose it. So as I build my parentheses, they're going to sit. This is going to be my front one. That's going to be my second one. Doesn't matter what order you put them in. So again, that main new step starting at number 9 is the GCF added to it. But then the rest of it is repetitive. The whole process is really repetitive. Even though it feels really messy and crazy and difficult. So more practice with GCFs being a variable, sometimes being a number. I'm just looking, see what we can work with. If y'all see any of them that you want me to do along with it. So this one, number 12 has, anybody want a picture? Yeah.
You just dropped the 2x in front of it. Well, no, you combine them to the 4.
Yeah, and so you could have brought it, so you could easily put it in this front parentheses. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It's whatever kind of flows out of your pencil. You know, mine goes back and forth. So sometimes I grab the parentheses that are already there, and that's my first one. I don't really stay consistent with that. And so, and that's good for y'all to be able to see that it really doesn't matter. I mean, there's no real systematic way of which one goes first, I don't think. Good question. You may want a picture on that. That's number 9. if you look at my videos and the course content, you'll see that I talk about the videos are labeled A equals 1 and A doesn't equal 1. So A not equal to 1. Because it's like that, that's kind of how I tell the difference between the two, or when I know what I need to use. So I'm just moving this over here so I have more space. Okay. So the one on the screen for the computer here is, I'm noticing that it's out of order just because my square is not leading. So first step is put it in order. And then we're going to check for a GCF. And it looks like we've got a GCF. I always go for the highest one and definitely use your calculator because you want the most to come out. Yes, a 2 will come out, right? Because they're all even, but something even bigger will come out. So definitely test that for yourself. Give you that opportunity to bring out the biggest because it'll want you to anyways. You're going to have that happen at some point. So the biggest GCF instead of 2 would be 6. Does everybody see that and agree?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if you don't take out the GCF?
I know it happens, and you can still factor it, but it's not factored completely.
It would be wrong.
It would be wrong.
It would be the simplest.
It wouldn't be factored down to the simplest. So if though at the end you could see where it's still too much, like if you can, like we'll work on this one in a minute with it without taking out the GCF, and I'll show you where you can see it, but not everybody sees it. They are a lot of times you are just like going so fast that you don't want. Yeah.
Because even like I just did this one and
Yeah.
I didn't do the
You have one on your,
and
which one? This one or the one on your screen?
the one on my screen, but like it allowed me to still find like
All of it. It all works. Yes. And that'll wear you out. So it'll all work. And then you're looking at it going, well, it worked, you know, done. It factored. But yeah, it's not the simplest. And so that's why I keep emphasizing that GCF, because you don't want to be doing it at the end because you're not going to be thinking about doing it at the end. And it just makes the math easier here. But if you're using your calculator, you know that it's not that hard. So as you type in A times C with such big numbers, you're going to find the numbers. It's all going to work. And so, yeah, that's kind of hard. I'll show you here in a second. So A is 5, B is 6, and C is negative 11. 5 times negative 11 is negative 55. And just by looking at the set that I'm looking at here, I can see that what we just multiplied actually subtracts to get us. And there's not anything in 55 besides 1 and 55 and 5 and 11. So right away, you see your set that will subtract. Remember that that's what this is telling us. We're going to subtract and have opposite signs. And if this is going to be the big is positive. So we're going to sub in. We will have already put in that 6 into the answer box so that we don't lose it. Making sure that we pay attention to where the sign goes. The sign's going to go. The negative is going to be on the smaller number, and the positive is going to be on the bigger number. Splitting it down the middle. 5W comes out the front. And 11 comes out the back. So I'm hoping that because we keep doing the same steps over and over again for now a third section, that this will become kind of automatic, that there's the material, the steps aren't new, it's just different variations on those steps. I used to think this chapter was miserably complicated and so hard to teach until I really simplified it to this just simple, these steps are over and over and over again. And it's kind of changed it for everybody. Most students do really well in this chapter. So let's look at it as Drew was talking about. What if we didn't remember the big GCF or to pull out a GCF? I don't even know what those numbers would say. So I'm going to bust out the calculator. I want to see what these factors are, because I do need 30 times negative 66. Big one. So in my calculator, I'm putting in this negative 1980 is this A times C. Think. Yeah. So I'm going to type that into this format, but I'm going to go ahead and write in that. I mean, you could type in 30 times negative 66 over X and not have to actually do the multiplication. And that's fine if you do. I don't know that it matters. You don't know if it saves you any time or not, but. Looking for the number that's going to give us 36 in the middle, and I'm way off. I'm in the 200s, 600s, but I'm seeing that I'm going smaller as I go up. So I'm going to keep scrolling up until I look like I'm getting closer to those numbers, and I see them. It actually is the 36 and the 66. That's funny that I did not. Well, that was what was happening. That's what happened there. So yeah, I guess it would have been. So then we have 30. And negative, no, wait, 66. And again, the bigger number is positive, so my 66 is going to be positive. So the same process happens here as I'm seeing it. And so that gets kind of messy. I'm not sure that I would. Because you're going to have to factor out the front and the back. Oh, no, you would just have to factor out the front. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So, or one of them. So one of the parentheses is going to be too big. And now you're not going to maybe know that. So that's the main, I used to try to show you this and be like, hey, you can still pull out that GCF. You can still pull out that GCF right here. And just know that the 6 is just going to come out of here. But it's not that happens very often. That y'all don't really get to this point and be like, oh yeah, the GCF and grab it. So yes, it could come out right here. And then you would have the same. And it wouldn't be, oh, that's way low. Sorry, guys. You wouldn't be working with.
So one of your parentheses really big, then you should go back and double check.
Yeah, if one of your parentheses and you have, so that's that automaticity, that if it's there, if you have some awareness of it, if you can look at your parentheses and be like, hey, wait a second, that one can be reduced.
Okay.
Then yes, you can catch it there and fix it there.
Okay.
You just kind of don't want to have to get to that point. Those are some big old numbers. The great question is certainly something I deal, like it is absolutely something that comes up, generally speaking, most every semester. So it is wait a second, I forgot the GCF. Can I catch it later? Yes, you can catch it later if you're aware of it later. So yes, if there's some bulkiness at the end and you're questioning it, definitely look into it. And if you catch it, then that's the other thing. There, I mean, if you're comfortable, you could probably grab it here and not have to redo all the work. I have a lot of students that they've thought they've seen it here and been like, oh no, and they started all over. I don't know one way or another what's best for you. Starting all over is kind of a cleaner slate, but if you're capable, you can just catch it there and be done. So a bunch of order stuff and GCFs. Trying to see if anything looks terrible. I mean, it all does. I know it does to you. Let's go back to this one. Jumping all the way out to number 17. And then we'll give us some time to work on your own because we're learning as we keep repeating all the same steps up here. Really where the rubber's going to hit the pavement is when you do the work. So going through your steps, it is in order. The first thing I'm noticing, now in this case, hopefully you're going to notice that negative on the front. So that's not something I'm going to want to try to factor into, like I'm not going to try to work with a factor of a negative going on within my parentheses. So that's going to be the very first thing I see. And I don't want to wait to the end to try to pull that out. I see that on some people's work and I just don't want you to try to work with it. So don't keep going and pull it through and then try to fix it. So very first thing we're going to deal with is a negative coming out. And it looks like everybody has a 3 in common. So a -3 comes out. That brings all this stuff to positive, which is nice. But I don't think it goes anywhere. This is one that we will watch me kind of struggle a little bit because I'm not confident. So double check me on my GCF. Did everything come out correctly? Oh, 2. That's a 2. That's a 2. There it is. There I have it. So A, B, C. I'm always happy when y'all can pipe in and correct me as I make a mistake. Mainly for your sake, it means that you're catching it, committing it to memory when that happens for you too. So A times C here is 6. The factors in 6 that add together to get us 7. That -3 is going to come down as part of my answer in my answer box already, so I don't have to worry with it. So all of this is just really repetitive. Same steps over and over and over again. Okay, so I'm going to show you this shortcut that again is a shortcut, and it's not, in my opinion, it doesn't really make a bunch of sense. Like it doesn't logically flow from all the work we've been doing. It is just straightforward a shortcut. So might be helpful for some of these bigger ones. I really don't know what you may decide. We'll click background here some, see if I can find a different one that would be. Okay. Okay, so starting the same process of what's going on with the numbers is standard form, GCF, what's our coefficient? Can I make it smaller? And I can, and I have to. In order to use the no fuss, you kind of have to remember this. And it's not when it's called, this shortcut's called There No Fuss. I can't remember who made it up, but it's been a decade at least. But again, we go through with this method though, if you don't catch the GCF in the beginning, it's not going to be obvious to pull it out at the end. And I'll show you why. So we go through and reduce it. So and then we do the same process of A is something, B and C. And you do your A times C. So all of this kind of still has to happen. And so finding those factors, and this is the hardest work. We have been doing the factor by grouping and the undoing of FOIL so much over the last few days that I'm pretty sure that's going to be kind of where you stand. But because once we find the factors, that's the hardest part. That's the hardest work. But finding the factors here, we find a +8 and a positive or -3. So from there, you take your your two factors, +8 and a -3, and you create them in numerators, make them a numerator in a set of fractions. And then just speaking the word fractions, everybody freaks out. But bear with me. I'm going to come along after I've done that. I've set up two fractions. I'm now going to use this 2 under each one in the denominator spot. So this is going to build the numbers that are going to sit in the parentheses. Now, in order to kind of help it flow, help you understand, I'm going to put this X right here, and that's what we do. And that's why it doesn't make sense, because yes, you grab the coefficient and use it the same in both places. But when you use the variable, you're only grabbing one of the variables because you are building the parentheses from this space. So again, it's just a shortcut. It doesn't have logic. So from here, you would use your calculator to reduce the fraction. So 8 divided by 2 is going to be a whole number 4 in your calculator. If you have a whole number 4 in your calculator, it goes on top. And then we build the parentheses from bottom to top. So this will be X plus 4. And again, you've got to remember the 3's coming on. And this will be 2X minus 3, because this one didn't reduce. Again, whatever the sign is going to be the sign that holds it to the variable. So that's No Fuss. And giving you just one example is not necessarily going to sell you on it, but I'm happy to do a few more just to give you an opportunity to buy in if you decide that that's something you want to use. Okay. I'm looking. See if there's another good one to do. That would make it. Let me see about this. I'm grabbing number 11 to see how this No Fuss would kind of resonate with anyone. It might be helpful for those of us who are just really bombarded by it all. Like you really haven't had time to do 4-3 and you don't feel committed to a way of doing it. It may be where you're like, oh, well, if there's another option, I want to do that. Shortcuts don't bother you. I like shortcuts by all means. I like them when they make sense. And it's just not something else that I have to memorize for a big test that I have to memorize so much other stuff. So your same process. I found the GCF, 56 is A. B is -17. And C is -3. A times C is 56 times -3. I'm gonna get -168, I believe. Don't wanna. Someone wanna do that for me? Make sure I'm right on that A times C. And I don't know my factors in 168 very well, well enough to just start working with them. But I do know my factors in 56, and that's kind of where I would go if I don't have my calculator. I personally just like the work that goes into something like this and kind of using your brain to kind of find the set that works. But by all means, use your calculator. This is me kind of coming over to the side and thinking about what might work. Oh, I see it. It's gonna be 21, and I'm making that up. It's not gonna be 21 and 8. I'm making that up for sure. I'm gonna make it 4. So it's gonna subtract to get 17. If you find it in your calculator, please speak up.
7 -24. Oh, no, you're looking for -17?
It's gonna subtract to get us -17.
Yeah, no, that's 7 and -24.
Oh, I see it. So I didn't really even have to break that up. There we go. 7 and -24. Thank you. Oh, back at what we're doing. We're doing the no fuss. So from 7 and -24, I would put the 56 under each one. Again, these will look like fractions, but they are your parentheses that you are going to build from the bottom up, which again goes against our reading left to right process. Reducing the fraction gives us 8s plus 1 here. Reducing the fraction here, an 8 comes out, maybe something else, I don't know. Let me get the 8 out first to see. And so this seems like an easier method, mainly because you kind of skip all the tedious work with the grouping and all of that, that if you kind of get lost with those steps, then maybe this is the right option for you. But you worked with it, and we have to do it in section 4.3. So that's why I kind of just push factor by grouping so much on y'all, because it's already something you're required to do through some of the questions anyways. But if you get to some of these bigger ones and it's just feeling kind of daunting, feel free to. The process is still the same. Basically, you found a GCF, you're just doing it vertically. And so again, this is just like putting a 7 in the middle and finding the GCF out of the front and the back. Okay, so I'm gonna give y'all some space and time to think and do some practicing. We will go over 4.6 and 4.8, but again, at this point, 4.6 and 4.8 are gonna just be further work on what we're doing now. So it's not really gonna be new. 4.8 is setting them equal to 0 and solving. So that's kind of the newest, the only new piece, but 4.6 is special cases. So all those special cases in 4.2 that were unique, we're going to be undoing those. We haven't touched those yet. So, okay.